Number one, every day I need to remember it all belongs to God. It all belongs to God. The whole universe belongs to God. You belong to God. The heavens, the sun, the moon, the stars, the trees, the plants, the rocks, everything ever created belongs to God. You don't really own anything. What you think you own is really on loan. You didn't own it before you were born. You're not going to own it after you die. God just loans it to you for 80 years. It was loaned to somebody else before you were born. It's going to be loaned to somebody else after you die, and you get to use it while you're alive. You don't loan anything. Now, if you'll start looking at everything in your life this way, that I don't really own anything. It all belongs to God, and it's just loaned to me for a while. Your worry's going to go. You see, if you go out after the service and you get in your car, you say, this isn't my car, it's God's car. And then you go home and you say, this is God's house, not my house. And then you sit down and eat some meal on a dish, this is God's dish. And when you get in bed tonight, say, this is God's bed. He's loaned it to me, and I get to use it, I get to take care of it, I get to manage it, but it's really God's. Everything is really God's. What will happen is your worry goes down. Why? Well, let's say you're driving a car and you're in an accident, you get a fender bender and you say, hey God, you got a dent in your car. It's not my car. You loaned it to me. You gave me the money to get it. What do you want to do about your car, God? You want me to fix it? Your kids need braces? Say, hey God, your kid needs braces. What are you going to? See, here's the point. If I'm in charge, if I'm God, if I'm the master of my fate, then I got to pay for it all. I got to worry about where it's going to come from. But if I'm really just a child of God, I'm just his child, and he's loaned me these things, and I'm just to manage it, I'm not responsible to pay for it all. Does that make sense? God, if I'm the employee and God's the employer, he is ultimately in charge of the benefits package. Question, how well are you taking care of God's property? Your body, it doesn't really belong to you. God made it. How well are you taking care of your body? Your time, your opportunities, your mind, how well are you taking care of your mind? Your talents, how well are you taking care of your talents? What are you doing with whatever God has given you? It all belongs to God, and you are to make the most of what you've been given. The fact of this verse says the guy was wasting his master's possession. Anytime I waste money, I'm wasting God's money. Number one, it all belongs to God. Number two, second truth to remember, and I need to remind myself of this every single day, is this. God is using money to test me. God is using money to test me. He's testing all kinds of things in my life. You see, God doesn't just automatically give his blessings to anybody. He tests you first to see if you're responsible, if you can handle it. And if you can't handle it, he's not gonna trust you with it. God doesn't give his spiritual power to just anybody. And he says, before I give you spiritual power, I'm gonna give you some material possessions. And I'm gonna see if I can trust you with material possessions, then I can trust you with spiritual power. But if you're not even managing your money well, why in the world should I give you the stuff that really matters? This is a test. Life is a test, life is a trust, and life is a temporary assignment. This life is preparation for the next. This is the get ready stage. This is the warm-up act before the real race begins. It's the first race around the track before the real race begins. This is the dress rehearsal before the real play begins, which is going to go on for eternity. And God is testing you on earth to see what he can trust you with in eternity. And the Bible says if you're faithful in little things, then you will be faithful in much in heaven. Now here's the third truth you got to remember. And these are all important, but they build in radical. First, it all belongs to God. And second, God is using money to test me. Number three, money is a tool. Money is a tool to be used for God's purposes. You say, what do you mean money is a tool? Doesn't the Bible say money is the root of all evil? No, it does not say that. It says the love of money is the root of all evil. Not money, but the love of money is the root of all evil. Okay? Money is neither good nor bad, right nor wrong. It's just there. It can be used to build great churches, or it could be used to finance drugs. It's just a tool. Luke 16, verse 9, notice he says, I tell you, Jesus says, use your worldly wealth. Circle the word use. Now, remember earlier we said we're not to love it, and here he says to use it. Okay, everybody look up here. This is really important. The Bible says you are to love people and use money. Love people, use money. Now the problem is everybody gets that reversed. And when you start loving money, you use people. You end up using people to get more money. The Bible says love people are to be loved and money is to be used. And if you start loving money, you're going to start using people. God says that's bad. Personal foul. You're out of the game. Money is a tool to be used for God's purposes. We're to use it. We're not to hoard it. We're not to stockpile it. We're not to worship it. Somebody said money is like manure. It said, you know, if you spread it all around, it makes things grow. But if you pile it up, it starts stinking. He's saying use temporary resources, what God has put in your hand, for permanent good. You say, well, how do I do that? How do I use my money for God's purposes? How do I use my money for good and for God? Well, there are a lot of ways to do that. But one of the ways you can do good with your money is use money to save time. Say what? Yeah, use money to save time. Why? Because you can always get more money, but you can't get more time. Time is far more important than money. Your time is your life. That's why when you waste time, you're committing suicide, because you're not getting that time back. If you watch a show on TV for an hour, you just gave up an hour of your life. Was it worth it? Because you're never getting that hour back. You can always get more money, but you can't get more time. So if you can use money to save time, that's a good investment, because time's more important than money. You can use money to save lives. You can use money to do good. You can use money to honor God. There are lots of things you can do good with money. Now, number 4, this fourth truth is really, really counterculture. But Jesus says it, so I have to teach it to you. And it's this. The best use of money is to use it to get people into heaven. Now let me read. This is the most problem verse that people don't understand. Verse 9. Jesus says, I tell you, use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves. He's talking about building relationships, so that when it is gone, they will welcome you into your eternal dwelling. He's talking about heaven. And he says, just like this dishonest guy made friends that he could count on later, he says, you need to use some of your money to make spiritual friends, eternal friends, friends you're going to have forever in heaven, who will welcome you when you get to heaven. Now, does that shock you? Now, what is he not saying here? He's not saying you can buy your way into heaven, because you can't. You can't buy your way into heaven. The price has already been paid by Jesus on the cross. He's not saying you can purchase your salvation, because you can't. You can't purchase your eternal salvation. It's free, it's a gift, it's by grace. What he's saying is use your money to build relationships that are going to go on and on and on and on for eternity. Spiritual friendships. Use your affluence for good influence. And he says that when I use my money to help other people meet Jesus, I make friends for eternity, and I gain rewards for eternity. Now circle the phrase, when they will welcome you into eternal dwellings. He's talking about heaven there. Now imagine, one day you're going to die, and you get to heaven, and there's 100 people there standing at the entrance to heaven, clapping and cheering you, saying, we've been waiting on you. We're so glad you're here. We're here because you spent some money to tell us the good news. And we're your friends for life. No, we're your friends for eternity because we're indebted to you. If it weren't for the way you used your money, we wouldn't have heard how to get to heaven. Are you using any of your money for that kind of thing? Is anybody going to be in heaven because of you? Because of the way you used your money? When you go buy a Christian book or a Bible and you give it to somebody who doesn't have a Bible, you just invested stored up treasure in heaven. When you go help support a radio program that shares the good news around the world, you have just stored up treasure in heaven. And that 50 years after you die, that church helps somebody get to know God in a personal way. You have just stored up treasure in heaven. That is the highest and best use because you're sending it on ahead. You can't take it with you, but you can send it on ahead. How? By investing in people who are going there. That is your eternal IRA, individual retirement account. Now, number 5, this is the last truth, and this is an important one. One day, I'll give an account to God. One day, there's going to be an audit on my life. How I use not just my money, but everything that God gave me. What did you do with what you were given? Your talent, your relationships, your opportunities, your mind, your creativity, your contacts, your networks. What did you do with what God gave you? Now, it doesn't really matter whether you got a lot or a little. Our church is a church family with people at every level of economic status. In our church, we have many people who are very, very, very poor. And in our church, we have some people who are very, very, very rich. And the rest of us are all somewhere in between. It really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much or how little you've got. What matters is, what are you doing with what you've been given, and can God trust you with more? You're going to stand before God one day. He's going to do a life audit. Verse 2 says this, "You must now give an account of your stewardship and report what you've done with what I entrusted to you, because your time as a manager is ending. One day, your time as a manager on earth is going to end.